My name is Linda Maliani. I was born and raised in Paramus as a parishioner of Our Lady of the Visitation. I was married to a wonderful man for 43 and a half years who went home to God 2 years ago. Pete and I were blessed with 4 children and 14 grandchildren who I'm glad to say keep me very busy. Recently, as he said, I was asked to share my story on Hallow, and Father Luke Mary heard it and asked me to share it today. So this is my story. In February of 1988, my husband and I had been married for almost 10 years. We were living our lives, raising our children, who were 6, 4, and 2 at the time, and managing all the responsibilities of a normal family life. Sadly, we weren't giving much thought to God, though. We took our kids to Mass on Sundays, mostly out of obligation. But beyond that, our faith didn't really permeate the rest of our lives. It was important to us that our children grew up Catholic, but we didn't know much about intimacy with Jesus. We had no idea how much we were about to learn. On February 12th of that year, my husband and I were getting our kids ready for a Valentine's Day party. I was bathing them and handing them off to him so he could dry their hair. While he was drying our 2-year-old daughter Alyssa's hair, he discovered a large lump on her neck, which was about the size of an egg. We took her to the pediatrician that same day, and tests soon revealed that the lump was a cancerous tumor on her neck. Worse than that, Alyssa had a mass the size of a grapefruit in her abdomen, and cancer cells were also found in her bone marrow. Alyssa was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma, a very rare childhood cancer. To make matters worse, the mass in Alyssa's abdomen was wrapped around her aorta and all her major blood vessels, which made Alyssa's tumor inoperable. The doctors told us that they had no cure for this type of cancer. They told us they would give Alyssa the best treatment they had, and that we should consider ourselves pioneers in the search for a cure for this terrible disease. My husband and I were devastated by the severity of her illness and realized that if God didn't heal Alyssa, she was not going to live. On one of the following nights, Alyssa fell asleep in my arms as I was rocking her. I laid her down on the floor, got on my knees next to her, and prayed, "God, I don't know where you are, but I have to find you." Then I heard God say to me, "I'm in the church." It wasn't an audible voice that I heard, it was more like a thought that I knew wasn't my own. So the next day I called our parish church and asked if they had a daily Mass. From that day on, I started going to Mass with my children every day that we weren't in the hospital. At daily Mass, I met people that had this peace about them, and I started praying, "Lord, I want that peace. I want to know you like they do." That same week, I also went to my closet and took out the small purse I was given on my first Holy Communion with the rosary still neatly tucked inside. I couldn't remember how to say the rosary, so I just started saying Hail Marys and Our Fathers on all the beads. Alyssa started her treatments, and we continued to pray. Around that time, my cousin called and told us that her husband knew a man who drove for Mother Teresa whenever she came to New York. A few months later, he called and told us that Mother Teresa was coming to New York that week, and we should take Alyssa to the 6 a.m. Mass. So on June 3rd, we had the unexpected opportunity and great honor of attending Mass with Mother Teresa in her convent in the South Bronx. We arrived that morning and entered the small chapel, which surprisingly to us had no chairs. The sisters brought in stools for us to sit on, and then we watched as the missionaries of charity entered the chapel. They each knelt on the floor, and Mother Teresa took her place behind them. After communion, Alyssa was crying, so I carried her out to the hallway so she wouldn't disrupt their prayer. Mother Teresa followed me out and came over to me with 3 miraculous medals in her hand. One she kept separate from the other 2. Pointing to the one, she told me to put that one on the baby, and for my husband and I to wear the other 2. Then Mother Teresa held my hands and taught me a simple prayer to say, "Mary, Mother of Jesus, make our baby all right." She said we should say this prayer over and over and over again with our whole family together. Mother Teresa then prayed this prayer with me a few times, which I was glad about because I was so nervous and I worried that I wouldn't remember it. When Mother Teresa was speaking to me, I felt as though I was the only person in the room. Up to this point, Mother Teresa was serious and focused, but then, as if God spoke to her, Mother Teresa's demeanor suddenly changed. She looked at me with an incredible smile, and she said, "She's going to be fine, and she's going to grow up." Mother Teresa started to walk away, but after a few steps, she turned back to me, and with a big smile, she repeated, "She's going to be fine, and she's going to grow up." We clung to Mother Teresa's words and began to pray with our children as she taught us. I wanted so badly to believe her. The next month, Alyssa had her first surgery on her abdomen, and the doctors were able to remove 75% of the tumor. The other 25% was wrapped around her aorta and all her major blood vessels. My husband and I were still hoping for a miracle and continued to pray together with our family. We also found out that so many relatives, friends, and people we didn't even know were praying for Alyssa, which became such a great comfort for us. During that summer, one afternoon, as I was leaving daily Mass with my children, I felt like God filled me with so much joy. I felt like it was overflowing. I remember walking across the parking lot and praying, "Lord, no matter what you decide to do with Alyssa, I'll never stop loving you." As soon as I said this, I felt an ache in my heart because I knew I was giving him permission to take her. He didn't need my permission, of course. What I was actually doing was surrendering, but at the time I didn't know that. In September, we attended a healing mass in Massachusetts with Father Diorio, a priest whom we were told had been given the gift of healing. He instructed us to place our hands where the cancer was. My sister was holding Alyssa and laid her hand on her tiny abdomen as we listened to Father Diorio pray for anyone with cancer to be healed. Just like Mother Teresa had taught us, we were begging God to make our baby all right. At that moment, my sister felt what she described as a punch into her hand from inside Alyssa's abdomen. We were overjoyed, not sure what to think, but were hoping for miraculous news when we saw the doctors. Father Diorio told us, however, that sometimes a tumor may not disappear overnight, but can take a little time to be gone. A couple days later, we returned to the hospital for her scheduled scans. Her oncologist was ecstatic when he spoke with us because the tumor that was left from the first surgery had shrunk 50%. Our disappointment that the tumor was there at all apparently showed because the clinician said to the doctor, "Mrs. Maliani is always waiting for that miracle." He responded, "You can wait for your miracle, but we have to be more practical, and this tumor is not going to just disappear." Surgery was scheduled for the following week. We were told that it would be another long and tedious surgery, about 7 hours. The doctors explained they would first have to cut away the scar tissue that would have grown after the first surgery, and then they were going to try to peel the remaining tumor off her aorta and other blood vessels. Alyssa left for surgery, and we remained in her room, prepared for another 7 or 8 hour wait. Only an hour later, the clinician approached us with an expression on her face I'll never forget. She told us that when they opened up Alyssa, there was no visible tumor. Of course, in my head, I'm thinking, so where is it? What do you mean it's not visible? She looked at us and continued, "There's nothing there, like it was never there. There's absolutely nothing there." This is not what the doctors expected. Only 1 week earlier, Alyssa's scans had shown the tumor was still very much there. She had no treatment in between. Another doctor followed, and with tears in her eyes, she said to us, "There was nothing there. There's no scar tissue to cut away. There was no stickiness on any of her organs, which happens when you've been operated on before, and there was absolutely no trace of the tumor. It looked like she had never had cancer." I couldn't believe it. God had healed Alyssa. Mother Teresa was right. She would be okay and she would grow up. More than just Alyssa, though, we were changed forever. Alyssa's healing wasn't the only miracle. Over that year, God had also healed us, healed our family, and drew us nearer to Him. My husband and I knew that our lives would never be the same. Alyssa's illness had changed the whole focus of our lives. We thanked God every day and began praying the rosary with our children. We continued to learn more about our Catholic faith and shared what we were learning with our children. We learned to trust God and to see Him as a good and loving Father, even when we couldn't understand what He was doing. After Alyssa's journey with cancer ended that day, a really wonderful end, we thought the suffering had passed. But God continued to invite us to surrender Alyssa to Him. About 10 years later, at Alyssa's high school physical in the year 2000, they found she had a serious heart condition, which they later told us was not related to her cancer or her treatments at all. Although she was completely without symptoms, the cardiologist told us that Alyssa's condition was so serious that she was in danger of sudden death. So here we are again with another rare, life-threatening illness. I remember crying out to God one night, "What's going on? Mother Teresa said she was going to grow up and she's only 14. I was trying to understand what was happening, but the difference this time was that I knew Alyssa was in the hands of a loving God who I truly believed loved her even more than I did. The doctors kept trying to help her, but nothing seemed to work, so she spent most of her freshman year of high school in the hospital. To the doctor's amazement, Alyssa wasn't experiencing any of the symptoms someone should have with her heart condition, so she continued to live a normal life whenever she wasn't in the hospital. I admired her relationship with God, which was innocent and sincere. I remember one day the doctor called with the results of her heart monitor. He said the medicine wasn't working again and she needed to go back into the hospital. I saw how upset she was, so I said, "Let's pray a rosary." Not a good idea. And she looked at me and said, "No, I'm not talking to him." Alyssa was in and out of hospitals all through high school. We were told that because of her dangerous arrhythmia and weak heart muscle, a heart transplant in the not-too-distant future would be her only hope. One difficult day, I went to speak to a priest I knew. He told me I had to be like Abraham and surrender my daughter and trust God. God confirmed this about a week later when we were in Ohio at Catholic Family Land for vacation. At their closing Mass, they always have a procession with a statue of the Holy Family, and everyone waves white tissues like they do in Fatima. We had done this many times there before, but this time, as I was waving the white tissue and feeling overwhelmed by Alyssa's illness, my eyes filled with tears, and I thought to myself, I don't even know why we do this or what it even means. A few seconds later, my son Joey, who was only 8 at the time, grabbed my arm and yelled, "Mommy, I know why we're doing this. We're surrendering." I knew God had answered my prayer through my young son and was reminding me to surrender again. Alyssa finished college and got her master's in counseling, still never needing the heart transplant. She was married in January of 2014, and as God would have it, she conceived on her honeymoon. Her cardiologist sent her to a high-risk obstetrician in the city who told her because of her heart condition there was no way she would survive the pregnancy and she should have an abortion. Alyssa then surrendered her own life to God. We searched for pro-life doctors and eventually found them through the Gianna Center, who promised to do everything they could for the baby as well as Alyssa. Alyssa survived the pregnancy with no complications. When she went into labor, she asked Father John Gordon to meet her at the hospital so she could receive the anointing of the sick. When my husband and I arrived at the hospital, the doctor told us, whoever was praying for Alyssa when she had cancer should be praying for her right now. We knew many people were praying again, especially to Mother Teresa, and we were too. A few hours later, we were thanking God again as with Alyssa's cardiac alarms blaring, little Maria Teresa was born. Since then, God has blessed Alyssa with 3 more babies. Mother Teresa was right. Alyssa was cured of her cancer, and she did grow up. Today, she's 38 years old and the mother of 4. When people ask me how Alyssa is doing, I always say she keeps us on our knees. God has taught us many lessons over our lifetime, but perhaps none more important than how to truly surrender to God and cling to his promises. In those very first days of Alyssa's cancer, my husband said to me, "Someday we'll find something good that came out of this." I looked at him like he was crazy and said, "Never. I'll never see anything good in this." Looking back now, I can see how much good God has brought out of that time in our lives. Our family and our lives would look very different if we didn't turn to God then and continue to seek him every day since. God bless you.